50 years ago, a man in rural Oklahoma could catch rain off his barn roof, shoot a deer for supper, burn his brush pile, and sell his neighbor a gallon of raw milk before breakfast. Not one of those things would have raised an eyebrow. Today, every single one could land you a court date or worse. Number 14 on this list carries fines up to $10,000. And number 7, something your grandfather did every Saturday, is now a criminal offense in most American cities. These are 20 skills that built this country and cost the government nothing, until the government decided they cost too much freedom. Hit subscribe, because what you are about to hear might change how you think about land you already own. Let us count them down. Number 20, collecting rainwater. The water falling on your roof used to belong to you. That was not a philosophy, that was just common sense. A farmer in 1975 could set a barrel under his gutter, fill a cistern behind the house, and water his garden, his animals, and his family without filling out a single form. Families across Appalachia, the Ozarks, and the high desert had been catching rain for generations. It was the most basic act of self-reliance there was. The sky opened up, the barrel filled, and life went on. Then Western water law caught up with the practice. States like Colorado, Utah, and Oregon began enforcing prior appropriation doctrines that technically made every raindrop the property of downstream water rights holders. Colorado did not legalize basic rooftop rain collection for residential use until 2016. Before that, a grandmother in Denver catching rain for her tomato plants was technically breaking the law. Utah restricted collection to 2,500 gallons. Oregon famously prosecuted a man for filling ponds on his own property with collected rainwater, hitting him with a 30-day jail sentence and a fine of over $1,500. The rain still falls the same way it always did, but the barrel underneath it now requires a permit, a limit, and in some jurisdictions, a lawyer. Number 19, burning your own trash. Every rural household in America had a burn barrel. That dented 55-gallon drum sat at the edge of the yard, where paper, food scraps, cardboard, and broken furniture went up in smoke every Saturday evening. The smell of smoldering trash drifting across a country road was as ordinary as the sound of crickets. Nobody called anyone. Nobody filed a complaint. You burned what you had, raked the ash into the garden, and moved on with your week. By the early 2000s, the EPA and state environmental agencies had classified open burning as a source of particulate pollution and dioxins. County after county banned burn barrels outright. In many states, burning household waste now carries fines starting at $200 for a first offense and climbing to $5,000 for repeat violations. Even in rural areas where the nearest neighbor is a mile down the road, a visible column of smoke can trigger a visit from the fire marshal. The ash that once fed gardens is now classified as potentially hazardous waste. Your grandfather's Saturday evening routine is a citation waiting to happen. Number 18, selling raw milk to your neighbor. In 1975, a dairy farmer could fill a glass jar from the bulk tank, hand it to his neighbor across the fence, and collect $2 without a second thought. Raw milk moved between families the way eggs and tomatoes did, as a handshake transaction between people who knew each other's cows by name. The FDA began cracking down on raw milk sales in the 1980s, and by the 2000s, the patchwork of state laws had turned a simple neighborly exchange into a legal minefield. Today, raw milk sales are completely illegal in roughly 20 states. In others, you can sell on the farm, but not at a market. Some states require herd share agreements where the buyer technically owns a portion of the cow just to get around distribution laws. Federal law prohibits the interstate sale of raw milk entirely. Farmers have been raided, equipment confiscated, and products destroyed. The milk has not changed. The cows have not changed. But the space between a farmer and his neighbor is now filled with regulations thick enough to choke a Holstein. Number 17, building without a permit. Your great-grandfather built his own barn with lumber he milled himself, and nobody from the county drove out to inspect the footings. If a man needed a shed, he built a shed. A cabin, he built a cabin. A root cellar, same story. The skill of putting up a structure with your own hands on your own property was the most fundamental expression of property ownership in rural America. Today, nearly every county in the country requires a building permit for any structure over a certain size, often as small as 120 square feet. That means a decent-sized chicken coop needs approval. The permit process involves plan review, setback requirements, foundation inspections, electrical inspections, plumbing inspections, and final occupancy approval. Fees range from a few hundred to several $1,000s depending on the structure. Building without a permit can result in fines, forced demolition, or liens against your property. People have lost homes they built with their own hands because the roof pitch did not match the county code. The right to build on your own land now requires permission from people who will never set foot on it. Number 16. Hunting for the family table without a tag system. In 1955, a man could walk into the timber behind his house with a rifle and come home with a deer for the family. Hunting licenses existed, but the complex tag and lottery systems that now govern big game hunting were largely a product of the wildlife management expansion of the 1970s and the 1980s. You bought a general license, you hunted in season, and you fed your family. Today, harvesting a single deer requires a state hunting license, a hunter safety certification, a species-specific tag often obtained through a lottery draw, compliance with antler point restrictions, mandatory check-in or reporting, and in some states, chronic wasting disease testing. Hunting out of season or without proper tags can result in fines exceeding $5,000, loss of hunting privileges for years, and confiscation of firearms and vehicles. The deer population in most states is actually higher now than it was in the 1970s, but the act of feeding your family from the land behind your house has become an administrative process that begins months before the season opens. Number 15. Using an outhouse. The outhouse served rural America for 3 centuries, a simple pit, a wooden structure, and a crescent moon carved in the door. Families who lived beyond the reach of municipal sewer lines used privies as a matter of course, and the practice was not considered primitive. It was practical. Health departments began requiring septic systems in the 1970s and the 1980s, and most counties now classify an occupied dwelling without an approved wastewater system as uninhabitable. Building or using a traditional outhouse as your primary sanitation can result in condemnation of your property, fines, and in some cases, the involvement of Child Protective Services if minors are present. Even modern composting toilets face regulatory hurdles in many jurisdictions, requiring special permits and sometimes full septic systems as backup. The simplest, cheapest, most time-tested sanitation method in American history is now, in most places, illegal as a primary system. Number 14. Selling homemade food without a licensed kitchen. Your grandmother sold pies at the church social, jars of jam at the county fair, and smoked sausage from the back porch without a health inspector ever setting foot in her kitchen. Home-cooked food moved through communities the same way gossip did, freely, frequently, and with zero paperwork. Today, selling food prepared in a home kitchen is regulated under cottage food laws that vary wildly by state. Some states allow only baked goods and jams. Others permit no home sales at all. Many require labeling, annual permit fees, gross sales caps as low as $25,000, and kitchen inspections. Selling a casserole to a coworker, technically, could violate food safety regulations in strict jurisdictions. The penalties range from fines of several $100s to misdemeanor charges. The same skill that fed church suppers and neighbors in need is now gated behind permits that cost more than the pie is worth. First pattern break. Here is where this list takes a turn. Everything so far might sound like bureaucratic overreach. Annoying maybe, but the next entries hit closer to the bone because they target the kind of everyday self-reliance that entire communities were built on. Your grandfather did not do these things to make a statement. He did them because that was how life worked. Number 13. Digging a well on your own private property. A man with a shovel and a dowsing rod could find water on his own land and dig until he hit it. Hand-dug wells supplied homesteads, farms, and small towns across America for centuries. The skill was passed from father to son, and a good well was worth more than the house sitting above it. Today, drilling or digging a well in most states requires a licensed well driller, a permit from the state water authority, compliance with setback distances from septic systems and property lines, water quality testing, and in some western states, proof that the well will not impact existing water rights holders. Digging without a permit can result in fines starting at $1,000 and orders to cap the well at your own expense. The water under your feet, on your land, reached by your labor, now belongs to the state until proven otherwise. Number 12. Living in a camper or RV on your own land. Plenty of families in the 1970s lived in trailers, campers, and converted buses on rural land while they saved money to build a proper house. Nobody called the county, nobody filed a zoning complaint. You owned the land, you parked your home on it, and you lived your life. Modern zoning ordinances in most counties now prohibit using a recreational vehicle, RV, as a primary residence, even on land you own outright. Violations can trigger daily fines, sometimes $50 to $100 per day, accumulating until you either move the vehicle or face legal action. People have been fined tens of thousands of dollars for living in recreational vehicles on their own property. The logic is health and safety, but the effect is that owning land no longer guarantees you the right to live on it in the manner you choose. Number 11. Keeping livestock in town. In 1970, backyard chickens, a milk goat, and maybe a pig were not unusual even in small towns. Families kept animals because animals kept families fed. Eggs from the coop, milk from the yard, and a hog in the fall meant grocery bills stayed low and the freezer stayed full. Municipal livestock ordinances tightened dramatically through the 1980s and the 1990s. Today, keeping chickens is banned outright in many cities and heavily regulated in others, requiring permits, coop inspections, setback distances, and limits on flock size. Roosters are almost universally prohibited. Goats, pigs, and other livestock are classified as agricultural animals and are banned from residential zones entirely in most municipalities. Fines for keeping prohibited animals range from $50 to $500 per violation, per animal, per day. The backyard that once sustained a family now cannot legally house a single hen without a permit in many American towns. Number 10. Fishing without catch reporting. A boy with a cane pole and a coffee can full of worms could sit on a creek bank all afternoon and bring home a stringer of bluegill for supper. Nobody counted the fish. Nobody measured the fish. Nobody asked what creek you were fishing. Today, freshwater fishing in every state requires a license, compliance with species-specific creel limits, minimum size requirements, and in some fisheries, mandatory catch reporting. Certain waterways require additional stamps, trout endorsements, or access permits. Fishing without a license carries fines from $50 to several $100s, and keeping undersized or over-limit fish adds additional penalties. The creek has not changed. The bluegill have not changed. But the boy with the cane pole now needs a license, a regulation booklet, and a ruler. Second pattern break. Notice the pattern forming here. Every entry on this list follows the same arc. A skill that costs nothing required no permission, and harmed no one gets absorbed into a regulatory framework that costs money, requires paperwork, and treats self-reliance as a problem to be managed. The next entries make that pattern impossible to ignore. Number 9. Home butchering and selling meat. A hog killing was a community event. Families gathered in late November, the men handling the slaughter and the women processing sausage, rendering lard, and curing hams in the smokehouse. A farmer could sell cuts to neighbors, trade a side of pork for hay, or send his boy down the road with wrapped packages for the widow at the end of the lane. Today, selling home butchered meat is illegal without USDA inspection in virtually every state. Even custom-exempt processing, where the animal is slaughtered for the owner's personal use, cannot be sold or given away outside the household in most jurisdictions. Building a USDA-inspected processing facility costs a minimum of several $100,000. The fine for selling uninspected meat can reach $10,000 per violation. The hog has not changed. The knife has not changed. But the hand that holds the knife now needs a federal inspector watching over its shoulder. Number 8. Growing food in your front yard. A kitchen garden planted wherever the sun hit best was standard practice in every American town. If that happened to be the front yard, so be it. Tomatoes along the fence, corn by the mailbox, beans climbing the porch rail. The yard produced food, and food was the point of having a yard. Municipal ordinances in dozens of cities now restrict or prohibit front yard vegetable gardens. Miami Shores, Florida, famously threatened a couple with daily fines of $50 for growing vegetables in their front yard, a case that went all the way to the state legislature before the law was changed in 2019. Other municipalities still enforce aesthetic zoning codes that classify food gardens as nuisances. The yard you mow, water, fertilize, and pay taxes on may not legally be used to feed your own family if the wrong neighbor complains. Number 7. Burning brush and clearing land. A farmer clearing fence rows, burning ditches, and managing pasture with controlled fire was practicing land management the way it had been done since before the country existed. Spring burning kept brush down, returned nutrients to the soil, and reduced wildfire risk. Open burning permits are now required in nearly every state, and many counties ban agricultural burning outright during certain months. Burning without a permit can result in fines from $500 to $10,000 depending on the jurisdiction and the size of the fire. If the fire escapes your property, you can be held liable for all suppression costs and property damage, potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars. The same burn your grandfather lit to clear his fence row now requires a permit, a notification to the fire department, a weather check, and a prayer that the wind does not shift. In 1976, homeschooling existed in a legal gray area in most states. Families who chose to educate their children at home simply did so, often without notifying anyone. The kitchen table was the classroom, and the parent was the teacher. Today, homeschooling is legal in all 50 states, but the regulations vary from minimal to invasive. Some states require annual notification, standardized testing, portfolio reviews, curriculum approval, or teaching credentials. Failure to comply with reporting requirements can result in truancy charges, fines, and, in extreme cases, involvement of Child Protective Services. The freedom to teach your own children has been preserved in letter, but the bureaucracy surrounding it has transformed a simple family decision into an ongoing compliance exercise. Number 5. Roadside selling without permits. A card table, a hand-painted sign, and a bucket of sweet corn on the shoulder of the county road. That was a farm stand in 1975, and it was how families turned surplus into cash. No permit, no sales tax collection, no health department involvement, just a farmer, his produce, and the people driving by. Today, roadside selling requires a vendor permit in most jurisdictions, compliance with signage ordinances, sales tax collection, and remittance, and in some cases, health department approval depending on what is being sold. Fines for unlicensed vending start at $100 and can reach $1,000. The corn has not changed. The road has not changed. But the card table now needs a tax identification number. A 1,000-gallon diesel tank behind the barn was standard equipment on every working farm. Gasoline drums in the shop, kerosene for the heaters, propane for the kitchen. Fuel was stored wherever it was needed, in whatever quantity made sense. EPA and state fire marshal regulations now govern the storage of flammable liquids on private property. Above-ground storage tanks over certain thresholds require secondary containment, spill prevention plans, and periodic inspections. Underground tanks require registration, leak detection systems, and eventual decommissioning. Non-compliance can trigger fines from $1,000 to over $25,000 per day. The fuel that kept the farm running now comes with a regulatory burden that can cost more than the fuel itself. Third pattern break. What is left on this list cuts to the heart of what it meant to live independently in America. These final entries are not about obscure regulations. They are about the fundamental relationship between a person and the land they own. Number 3. Disconnecting from the grid entirely. In the 1970s, families across rural America lived without electricity, running water, or municipal services because those services had not yet reached them. Nobody penalized them for it. They lit kerosene lamps, pumped water by hand, and heated with wood. It was life, and it worked. Today, many jurisdictions require occupied dwellings to be connected to municipal water, sewer, and electrical services where available. International building codes adopted by most counties mandate electrical service as a condition of occupancy. Homes without grid connections can be condemned as uninhabitable. Families in Florida, Alabama, and other states have faced legal action for living off-grid in homes that met every practical need but did not satisfy code requirements for utility connections. The right to live without dependence on centralized systems, a right exercised by every generation before this one, now requires permission that is rarely granted. Number 2. Repairing your own vehicle for road use. A shade tree mechanic could rebuild an engine, weld a frame, swap a transmission, and put the truck back on the road without anyone asking questions. If it ran, it drove. If it drove, it was road legal. The skill of keeping machinery alive with your own hands was one of the most common and respected abilities in rural America. Modern emissions testing requirements, safety inspection programs, and anti-tampering laws under the Clean Air Act have made certain home repairs technically illegal if they affect emission systems. Removing or modifying a catalytic converter, even on your own vehicle, carries federal fines starting at $2,500 for individuals. State inspection failures can keep a mechanically sound vehicle off the road indefinitely. The truck that your grandfather kept running for 30 years with baling wire and ingenuity would not pass inspection in most states today. Number 1. Living on your land the way you see fit. This is not one skill, it is all of them. 50 years ago, owning land meant something uncomplicated. You could build on it, grow on it, hunt on it, burn on it, dig on it, park on it, and live on it in whatever manner your means and your abilities allowed. The deed in your hand was permission enough. Today, that same deed comes with zoning restrictions, building codes, environmental regulations, homeowners association covenants, utility mandates, and permit requirements that collectively determine not what you can do with your land, but what you are allowed to do. Every entry on this list represents a skill that was once as natural as breathing, collecting rain, growing food, raising animals, building shelter, feeding neighbors, teaching children, fixing what is broken. Each one now exists inside a framework of regulation that your grandfather would not recognize and would not accept. The land has not changed. The skills have not changed. The rain still falls, the deer still walk through the timber, and a man with a shovel can still find water if he digs deep enough. What changed is the space between a person and the life they want to live. That space used to be empty. Now it is filled with forms, fees, and the constant quiet threat of a fine. Try telling your grandfather he needs a permit to catch rain off his own roof. Then watch his face. That expression, that disbelief, that slow shake of the head is everything you need to know about what we traded away. Share this with someone who remembers when the land was yours and the government had better things to do. And if you have a story about a skill that used to be legal where you live, leave it in the comments. This list could have been 50 entries long, and every single one of them would have made your grandfather furious.